In a chilling escalation, Russia has launched one of its most extensive aerial assaults on Ukraine. Nearly about 400 drones and more than 40 missiles targeted multiple regions, leaving at least 4 people dead and 40 others injured. The cities from Kiev to Lviv were plunged into chaos as explosions lit up the night sky. Zelensky is urging the West to act quickly. And our next story brings you close to what's actually happening on the ground in the Russia-Ukraine war.
Ukraine wakes up to a nightmare, the sky filled with the ominous hum of drones and the deafening roar of missiles. This is the moment when missiles struck the city of Lutsk in western Ukraine. Russia's unprecedented attack deployed 407 drones and 44 missiles. Including ballistic and cruise types across nearly every region of Ukraine. The aerial assaults have been relentless. CCTV cameras catch the moment of the Russian strike on a Kharkiv residential area. In Kyiv, the capital, explosions rocked residential areas, igniting fires and causing widespread damage.
There was an air raid alarm. We went out to the parking lot, and then somehow everything quietened down. We went up to our floor because we had a small child. And then we heard a drone. We heard it coming very close, and then there was an explosion.
We were at the parking when we heard a strong explosion. People ran out to see what happened. The firefighters and an ambulance arrived. Then missiles start coming.
The Russian assault wasn't focused on Kyiv alone. Cities across Ukraine also came under heavy attack, causing significant damage to infrastructure and civilian casualties. President Zelensky is urging his Western allies to come to his rescue immediately.
Please urge for new effective sanctions against Russia and their regime for the sake of putting an end to murders and strikes, for the sake of reaching real peace, for the sake of real responsibility of Russians for the war.
Russia's defense ministry says the strikes were in response to what it claims are terrorist acts by the Kyiv regime, adding that it had targeted military sites. Ukraine isn't backing off either. It has now targeted energy facilities in Russia for the first time since March. In addition to fuel reservoirs, Russian airfields in Saratov and Ryazan regions were also targeted by Ukrainian forces. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, now joining us for more perspective, we've got Mr. Heino Klink, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia. Mr. Klink, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on WION. Now, the question that a lot of people, in fact, want to know is, in the aftermath of Ukraine having carried out those daring drone attacks, destroying some of Russia's nuclear bombers, people have been asking, how will Russia respond? In your assessments, will Russia continue to do what it has been doing for the last week, or is there something dramatically different that we can expect from the Russian president?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think, as we've witnessed overnight, is standard playbook of the Kremlin, which is to target civilians primarily in these latest strikes. As President Putin told President Trump during their phone call yesterday, Russia had to respond. I think everybody knew that was going to happen. We saw now the scale and scope of that response, again, being primarily focused on civilian targets. Russia is under some pressure, obviously, by the Ukrainian military's ability to strike deep within Russia. And the Russians have to demonstrate that they still have levers of power to utilize against Ukraine. However, I do not think we are going to see much difference than perhaps an increase in scale and scope of aerial assaults against the Ukrainian civilian population.
Interesting. Now, In your assessment, how would the United States now play this scenario out? Because Donald Trump described this scenario between Russia and Ukraine as two boys who are fighting it out and he wants to see them fight it out for a little more before he in fact steps in with his push for negotiations further. How would the United States under Donald Trump now approach this?
Well, I think we have to see. I think we have seen the tone and tenor of the administration with respect to how they are dealing with Russians change over the last 100 days or so. I think there is more and more an opinion now within the administration that the Kremlin really isn't interested in peace. And I believe that the Trump administration has as one of its greatest priorities trying to bring this war in Europe to an end. So I think at a certain point,
right,
if the Russians are not willing to negotiate in good faith and are not willing to compromise, that there's going to be additional pressure levied against Russia, both economically and perhaps in other ways as well.
Very quickly, because we're short of time, you say that the American assessment is that the Russians are not ready to negotiate yet. But the aftermath of those attacks on those nuclear bombers of the Russians, do you think the Ukrainians are ready to negotiate?
I think the Ukrainians are, in fact, ready to negotiate, absolutely. But if history is any guide, during a military conflict, the days leading up to an actual negotiations are perhaps the most dangerous, the most volatile, and perhaps the most violent. So I think the Ukrainian operation that we just recently witnessed was meant to demonstrate that Ukraine also has levers to pull that will affect the Russian calculus. And I think it was actually, I view the Ukrainian attack actually as a step towards negotiations.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Heino Kling, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.